one thing on the colour issue that we didn't mention is I did include a couple of images in the book, that there are a couple of colour LRO images, lunar reconnaissance orbiter images, which I found, and they're quite unusual because we do have these perfectly circular craters, and both of them are quite close to each other. I just discovered these by accident, and they do have a little bit of colour on them. They have a little bit of blue coloration in them, and you won't see this in the paperback, of course, because it's black. It's a monochrome paperback, but you can see it in the ebook version of the book. And they do look a little bit unusual. These perfectly circular sort of, they're not even impact craters. It looks like somebody scraped off the surface in a circle, you know. It's quite an unusual crater, which it's in one of the LRO images, and there is a little bit of colour in it as well. So not every single image of the moon is black and white, and LRO has a little section on the website about that.
Right. All right, let's move on to Mars, Andrew. You okay to do that now? Now, people can watch the lecture. As I said, I went into a fair bit of detail on Tom Van Flandern, and we're going to talk about that now. The famous face on Mars, which most people probably think is some structure of rocks which happens to look like a face. But both you and I think, agree that's not the case, is it?
No.
I mean, where do you want to start, Andrew?
Well, again, you know, if we watch Richard's lecture on that, and that's a pretty good summary. But what we can say, as Richard said in the lecture, is that they lied about that image. They lied that they had two images of this face when they first discovered it.
So let's just say what mission that was, Andrew.
Yeah, that was the Viking image.
Right. So let me just ask you, Andrew. There were orbiters there before Viking, before
Correct.
1977. In what year? 60s?
I forget.
Late 69, is it?
It was it was mid 60s onwards. They had the Mariner images, which were the earlier ones, where it had. I think it did do quite well, the Mariner image, not of the face, but they had other images which came back from Mariner which were interesting, and it was the Viking missions which returned this image of the face initially.
So you think those earlier missions, there maybe were people looking at those NASA images thinking, we might have something artificial here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that somebody within the organisation has known that Mars has a history, basically.
Yeah.
That's my conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I claim to know exactly what that history is, but it does have a history, and that history is not just rocks and you know, and frozen carbon dioxide. Mars has a history, and that's the bottom line, really, where we're going with this. So they lied about the face image. They lied about the discovery of it, and they said that we'd taken this image, it looked like a face, and then we took a second image, you know, you covered it in your lecture, and it went away. It was just an effective light and shadow. So and then we go on from there. In the, you know, they initially covered it up. It was rediscovered by Vincent de Petrio and Greg Molinar. They were looking at it. They started looking at it, and another chap called John Brandenburg, who came back later on and talked about stuff. They all ended up with two of these images of the face. They did some analysis. They looked at various other objects that were near the face. I think, again, you covered this in your lecture, didn't you? And they concluded that there was something significant, and it was significant, and they felt that they had enough data between them. There's Richard Hoagland, Dr. Mark Carlotto. He did some 3D image modelling. He was doing that, you know, years before sort of full CGI that we have now. He developed a shape from shading algorithm where he was able to take the original Viking images and then imply what the relief was, what the shape was from the imagery.
Is this what Tom Van Flandern showed in his lecture?
Well, he showed the image of the face. Yeah, and that's right. He did show that, and that was done by Dr. Mark Carlotto, who I've communicated with, by the way, fairly recently. And I think Mark Carlotto, you know, he's one of the good guys. He did, I think, do his best to show that the face was not a natural structure. It had too much structure within it to be a natural structure. It is a construction of some kind.
Yeah. If you look at the border, you can estimate a height, what it must be, because it's a mile long. So it's got to be a good portion of a mile up on the sides.
It's a fair size,
maybe a few hundred meters up around, and then this massive structure of a face. which would dwarf the pyramids. It's a mile long.
Yeah, that's right. It's huge. I mean, it's a huge structure, and you know, when you really study it for enough time, you know, I don't know what type of face it is. I'm not even 100% sure it is a face, but I'm probably 80-90% sure that it's a face. You know, it seems that's the only thing it could be. If it's not a face, I don't know what it would be. Basically, when you've looked at the other data. Yeah. And then you get in, is it the face of Adam, the first man that came to Earth, or is it the face of a lion, or half a lion, half a man? Is there a connection to the Sphinx? Some people, of course, will argue that that's the case. I don't know. I haven't made myself comfortable with that.
Another question, Andrew, would be why would you build a massive face on? Because Van Flandern reckons it was on the equator when it was built, so it's bang on the equator. And it probably could be seen, if you had a big enough telescope, I guess, from a long way off.
Yes.
So why have they done that?
That's right. I mean, we don't know. I mean, you could maybe say why was the Great Wall of China built? You know, why build a wall?
Well, we know why walls are built, though, don't we?
Yeah, I suppose. So. I mean, it's facetious.
Yeah, they're to keep people out or keep people in.
But to an alien race that just has one race and doesn't have any subdivisions, what would they need a wall for? You know? Do you know what I mean? It's just
it's, I suppose. Well, as I say in the lecture, it's staring out into space.
Yeah. It's. I think that's what makes it difficult for people to accept it is a face. You're back to the motive again. It's the same with 9/11. Why did they destroy the towers like that? You know, why did they build a face like that? You know, because we don't know what motivated them to build the face.
I'm convinced that's a face. I'm convinced it's an artificial structure.
Yeah.
When you look at Van Flandern's work, and how disgusting that they've kept that from everyone on the Earth.
Yeah.
It's just the most mind-blowing discovery that on another planet not far from us is this face, which is a mile long, and someone eons ago built that. People building it, or whoever building it, and you know they're not going to put that in kids' science books. They're not going to. They're not going to say, well, you know, make people wonder about who built that and why they built it, and show the human race the further investigation of it, and you know there would be a weekly broadcast on the progress of the Mars investigation team, but one on the surface.
That's right.
And we're fed all this Elon Musk bullshit.
And that is what galls me. And you know, of course, being as I probably said on Rich Planet before, I was very interested in astronomy as a kid. You know, and the Apollo program and all that stuff was going on when I was a kid. And that's what inspired me and what made me interested. Yeah. So when you find out just exactly what you said, you know, it's pretty soul-destroying, really, that they would cover this up. Like I said, the most important discoveries that they have found, they've said they're not real. Yeah. You know, they said that it's just a trick of light and shadow and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's other stuff to say on this, which we haven't said on Rich Planet. And some of that's later in the book. And it goes into, for example, and I may have mentioned this bit on Rich Planet before, the Mission to Mars film, which was this film that was made in year 2000 with Gary Sinise. And that also has a segment in it where they go into the face. And I think that segment, and people may have heard me say it before, I've put a bit more detail in the book, was a kind of disclosure where the astronauts on this fictitious Mars mission go into the face. They're shown this 3D holographic simulation of the solar system, and you know an object comes in and hits Mars on the South Pole and basically wipes the whole planet out. And then this alien comes in and you know sort of gets them all to stand in a circle and then shows them that the life travelled from Mars to the Earth. And it started life on Earth.
What year is the film, Andrew?
That was year 2000.
Right. Okay.
And if you watch this ending, the whole film, you know, it's sort of boring, but it's the last sort of 40 minutes. I thought when I saw this, I couldn't believe it.
I don't think I've seen that. Yeah, I don't really watch films.
Right. But if you would just watch the end of it, it's on YouTube. I think you can watch it on YouTube, and it's extraordinary. And I do think what they were doing is they were giving people information, but it's done in a plausibly deniable way because it's done in a science fiction film. you know. And that theme has emerged in this book to some degree. As
So they fly into the eye, is it? Or
they know that what happens is that the guy, one of the mission to Mars film is a rescue mission. They have a mission that goes to Mars. The original mission crash lands, or something goes wrong with their base, and only one guy survives. And they send another mission to rescue this guy. And then when they get there, they find he's been there for about 2 years, and he's worked out that there's something going on the surface. And then he finds that the face has been sending out messages. So he decodes these messages, and he comes up with a signal and sends it to the face in a little rover thing that they have. And the face opens up, and they all go inside it. Yeah. You know, and this is all in the film.
Because if you remember, we had the alien face crop circle, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yeah. And that was in 2001, I think. So, you know, there's various threads that I think that are worth looking at. And just on, maybe we can read one particular thing, or you might even want to play the clip, Richard, if you want, is the guy from the Disclosure Project Witness.
Not Carl Wolf.
No. It's the guy that says that it's fake. They know it's a face. It's 45,000 years.
Oh, that's not in the main Disclosure Project video, though, is it?
No, it's not. But it is in the executive briefing.
Yeah.
I'll just go up and find that. So we have this Disclosure Project witness called AH. He doesn't give his name. And this is one of those things. We know that some of Greer's witnesses were putting out disinformation. Some of them, I think the majority of them were genuine. We know that Greer himself has put out disinformation about 9/11. That's a whole other subject. But this particular guy, I think, was telling the truth. If you listen to the whole interview, it's called AH. The whole thing's about 50 minutes or an hour. You can listen to it on YouTube. And he said that he has friends in the NSA, CIA, NASA, JPL, ONI, that's the Office of Naval Intelligence, NRO, Area 51 of the Air Force, Northrop, Boeing and others. He used to work at Boeing, this witness, and he was a surface technician, so he does give a little bit about what he did. He says, I have another contact at NASA, JPL, that I haven't mentioned. I can't mention too much about it because he is still working there. This was recorded in the year 2000. Yeah. This person that I know is very high up in NASA. He said they know it's a face. They know that it was carved by somebody other than us. In an imaging area, they know for a fact that the face on Mars is real and it was not made by windstorms or trick of lighting or anything like that. They know for a fact that the face on Mars was made by an extraterrestrial race that came to the Earth about 45,000 years BC. And I find that more interesting because he's given that specific date. And listening to the whole interview, the guy does, if you listen to it, to me, he doesn't sound like he does sound like he's telling the truth as best he knows it. Yeah,
well, we could get that analysed. And any other disclosures in that? Does he say, for example, whether they had played any part in the genetics?
He does mention something about that. I can't off the top of my head remember all the details of it, but he does go into some of those areas. It's quite an interesting interview to listen to. And it did a little bit remind me of what Edgar Fouché wrote in his Alien Rapture book, because he talks about some of the alien interference in our genetics. He talks a little bit about that in the Alien Rapture book as well.
And does he mention whether there's any further investigation going on? This would be in 2001.
No, I don't think he mentions that he knows about any specific investigations that are going on.
Now, Arthur C. Clarke wrote a very famous book with the title around that time, 2001, Space Odyssey. Was it 2001, A Space Odyssey? You just wanted to point out something on that book, because you think Arthur C. Clarke might have been, quote-unquote, in the know.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of jumping around a bit here, but I do think that he was given certain information, and some of that went into his books in some form.
So you just think that they can't resist putting it out, but in a form that most people aren't going to suss, that they're telling you stuff.
Yeah, I think this is the way that the occultists work, isn't it? Allegedly, what I'm told is they put things in encoded form, or some way where you're not immediately going to notice it unless you've got your spider senses, well tuned and so forth.
I mean, they could in the future use that to show, well, it can't possibly be true because it was in this fictional thing that Arthur C. Clarke wrote. You're just quoting from that.
Exactly.
Type thing.
That's
or they could say, well, actually, no, we did tell you. We haven't been lying to you. Do you see what I mean? They could use it. They can then use it in the future for whatever propaganda they want.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly the way that it works. Just on the Arthur C. Clarke thing, though, there was another thing that one of his books that was published in 1970, strangely, it wasn't about the face on Mars, but it was, as I say, it was published in 1970, and it had this image of a face on the surface of a planet looking up into space.
Right.
I've got the details of this in the book, and you can actually look for this book cover, because there were several editions of this book, but it was only one that had actually this...
So this is well before Viking?
Yeah,
7 years?
Yeah, this was 7 years before Viking,
Right.
that you've got this image on a science fiction book cover
Yeah.
where it's showing a face, looking into space. And there was another one, that I think was Wayne Herschel that discovered that image originally, but there was another one from a comic book, and it was called... there was actually a comic, and it was called, this was from 1958, it was published in a comic called The Race for the Moon. The Race for the Moon. So the 1958 comic, The Race for the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got this story in it called The Face on Mars, 1958.
Right.
Huh? How is that possible? And that's a real comic book, but that's from 1958. So that, to me, is strong evidence that Mars has a history, and somebody knew what that history was, and somehow that was getting out into either science fiction stories or comic books way before Viking and way before the controversy and so forth that we've just discussed.
So do you think that's more likely to be because they've found evidence on the Earth of that, or do you think they've had a previous space mission to 1958?
I don't know. I mean, that's obviously speculative.
See, some people would then say, oh, well, yeah, they were planting all of this psychology about there being a face on Mars, and what you've seen, Richard, is just a fake face on Mars from a fake mission, just to make you then... but when you look at Van Flanden's analysis and the fact that they've had to use several different photographs in order to come up with that 3D relief map,
Right.
seems genuine to me.
Yes, and I mean also we've got ESA images which show the same thing. Some of the ESA images are actually very interesting, and they're not talked about that much. There was a set of ESA from the European Space Agency images. They were taken, I think, collated in 2005,
Right.
and they actually ended up putting this horn on the face. And it's ridiculous. You can actually see this as well. You go onto their website, and one of the images has got a horn on the head of the face sticking out, but all the other images haven't. So one of them must be right. In other words, ESA's own images of the 3D relief are not consistent with each other,
Right.
let alone NASA's. So there's something very weird going on with that. And of course, like you say, people say, "Oh, you're just talking about fake images." Why would you put out a fake image of a face on Mars? What? I can't think of a motive for putting out a fake image on Mars.
Yeah.
And this thing with the 1958 face comic, I only discovered that a couple of years ago.
And also we know that they then once they found them, they put them through a low pass and high pass filter to make it look like nothing.
Yes.
And then said, oh,
Yeah,
this
they
is
did.
the picture. So they
That was the first,
kind of
yeah.
rubbed it out.
Yeah.
Oh, that was all part of the psyop to make you believe that the original one was real. No, I think
no.
they were trying to hide it.
And the other thing which we can get onto, I think, which is essentially David Percy has done a lot of work on this, and I think he was the original one to notice this. And
Before you go on to that, Andrew, do you know of any examples on the Earth where there's large monuments of faces staring out into space?
Not on the scale of on Mars. There are a couple of people that have since claimed that there are indeed faces staring into space. One of the things I came across, I can't remember. I linked
You
to
mean
the book.
you're talking about ancient structures?
Yes.
Right.
There's certainly one where somebody has claimed that it's a face looking into space.
Right.
And when I looked at this image, I couldn't quite convince myself that it was that significant.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't very big. You probably wouldn't be able to see it from high up. It's nowhere near on the scale of a face.
All right. So you were talking about David Percy.
Yeah. So going back to the Cydonia region, which again you talked about in your lecture, and he pointed out that if you look at a particular region near the face, there is this thing called the cliff, and there is this thing called, I think they just call it the crater, and there is this thing called the wall and the fort, and these are all geologically interesting features which are quite close together in this region, which is called Cydonia. And when you take the cliff, and we can show this on the screen, and I did mention this. We mentioned this in an earlier Rich Planet program, I know, but it's worth mentioning it again because I think it's highly significant. You overlay the cliff and the crater, and they call it the tholus on Mars. Mm-hmm. You overlay that with Avebury, and it matches features in Avebury. And it was David Percy that first discovered this, and he used a Viking image to show this. And what I did in my book was I used the more recent Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter images, and also the Mars Global Surveyor images to do this in high resolution. Mm-hmm. And I actually found it was entirely in agreement with what he said. And I also found that this little, again in this crater, you've got this little, pip on it or whatever that sticks out of it, as we saw on some of the craters on the Moon. And that actually matches with some contours on the Ordnance Survey map for Avebury. And it's in perfect alignment on a scale of 14:1. So that is extraordinary.
Right. So you're certain then that looks to me like a mound on Mars. You've got on page 75, Andrew.
Yes.
The 3 images along the top. The one on the left is of Mars. Yes.
Yes.
So the circular feature at the bottom right.
Yes.
The large circular. That looks like a mound to me. That doesn't look like a crater.
The one at the bottom right is the mound. Yes, that's the tholus. The one at the top.
Oh, that's a mound on Mars.
Yeah,
and it's lining up with
Silbury Hill. Yeah.
Silbury Hill.
Yeah, in those proportions.
That's right. So, okay. So, is there an explanation why you've got such a perfect circular mound on Mars?
Well, it's not perfectly circular. If you look, it's sort of ellipsoid, but Mark Carlotto has done a 3D fly around of that as well. He's got they've mapped that out pretty well, that object now, and it is definitely a mound, and it's got this little peak on it, and that again is unusual geologically. To explain that as a geological formation from my extremely limited knowledge of geometry, I can't think what would have caused that geologically.
So we have Silbury Hill, which I'm sure a lot of people know about, and you've got the stone circle at Avebury there, which a lot of people will have been to. Historic place.
Ancient site,
ancient site. So let's extrapolate a bit. Come on, let's have a bit of fun. What could explain that? So if this Disclosure Project guy is correct, that someone came from Mars 45,000 years ago, they've rebuilt something that was on Mars. You think?
It looks that way, doesn't it?
So
it looks like an arrangement of monuments.
Because Silbury Hill, there is a huge mystery because it's supposed to have taken so many 100 years to build. Am I right?
It's the largest man-made mound in Europe. Yeah.
Right. And am I right in thinking it took 200 years to build or something?
I don't know the history of it, but something like that. Yeah.
Right, certainly,
it's a mystery to why it was put there.
Many lifetimes to build, and you ask the question, well, why would anybody bother building something that's going to take 200 years to build?
Yeah.
Why would you put all that effort and work in when you're not going to see it? Neither are your grandkids going to see it, or their grandkids going to see it. So did these people from Mars build Silbury Hill and put the stone circle there? And that then leads you to say, well, are there other structures on the Earth that maybe were put there by people who came from Mars?
I think, again, I don't know. It's not something I've really gone into. I know there's been books written by, we obviously you've just interviewed Adrian Gilbert, and he's done some research in some of these areas. But some people have said, for example, that we're talking about energy. In other words, are these structures arranged in a certain way to create or channel or attract or induce certain energies, earth energies of some kind? And I suspect it's got something to do with that.
Oh, well, I've got no doubt that thing at Silbury Hill had a function. It's not just a pretty... No.
It wasn't built as a monument or just as a pretty object, as you say.
No.
So...
Right. All right. Now, so does the angle of 19.47 or whatever, does that come into this or not?
It does, yeah. I mean, this is a claim that if you, and I did verify this pretty much, My measurement that I did myself just on my computer was just very slightly different, but it basically bore that out. In that if you draw a line from this tholus, which is the equivalent of Silbury Hill, up to the edge of this little, sticking out bit of this crater at the top, and then you draw a line from the tholus to this thing that's called the cliff on Mars, and you look at the angle between them, it is about 19.4 or 19.5 degrees. It depends where you draw that actual line, whether you go one side of this little, cut out thing, or the other side sort of thing, or through the middle of it. It's a little bit arbitrary. But it is round about 19.4, 19.5 degrees, that sort of figure.
Right. Now, just explain why that's a significant angle, Andrew.
Well, this comes from this idea of putting I explain this in the book. It's about, many people have talked about this. Richard Hoagland, David Wilcock, and others have talked about this. Where if you put a tetrahedron, which is a pyramid with a triangular base, inside a sphere, so that the vertices touch the edge of the sphere, then if you have one vertex at the top of the sphere, the other three will be at an angle of 19.47 degrees below the equator of the sphere. Basically, it's to do. In other words, it's to do with geometric shapes and how a sphere fits over a tetrahedron.
Right, and it seems that some of the planets, the gas giants, for example, have got features on them at that angle.
Correct, yes.
Right.
Yeah, we may have talked about this before on Rich Planet, but yeah, it's like Jupiter's red spot is round about 19 degrees, and the volcanoes on Mars, I think it's one of those is at 19.5 degrees latitude or thereabouts, and the big island of Hawaii is round about there on the Earth as well, which is meant to be one of these energy outflow points.
Right. So it's an angle which is harmonious with nature, let's say.
Something like that, yes,
right.
That's what it appears to be. And again, there's books have been written on this, and probably in much more detail than I have, but I have put an explanation in this book about where that comes from.
Right. Now, one of the images, can we move on to some of the Cydonia images, or do you want to stay on?
Yeah, no, whichever you
now,
want to
because
go.
there's one of them where it looks like it possibly was a four-sided pyramid, and it's maybe been whacked by an asteroid or something, and it then kind of looks like a five-sided pyramid, but I'd like to see a relief of that feature. But it doesn't look like very hardened edge pyramid, or all of these pyramids on Mars. They look like they're very well worn if they are pyramids.
That's what I thought as well, yes. This D&M pyramid, which was the...
D&M pyramid.
Yeah, the Di Pietro, I always get his name wrong, and Molinar pyramid. That was also quite near the face, and as you say there, it looks like a five-sided pyramid, which is slightly unusual. We don't, if we do say it's a pyramid of some kind, I don't know of any five-sided pyramids on the Earth that I've come across. Maybe somebody again will write in and correct us. But so that is unusual. But as you just said there, I'll just say the same, that it looks like an eroded. It's heavily eroded. So much so that have we really got a fifth side, or is it just some?
Well, I think it's maybe been four-sided, and then the two sides on the right have been pushed by an impact, maybe possibly.
Yeah.
So if that is a pyramid, do you know what its scale is?
Yeah, well, I mean it's big. I mean it's about 2 miles along the base,
right,
2.25 miles.
Way bigger than anything on Earth.
It's much bigger.
Right.
So is that a pyramid? I think it could very well be. But then the curious thing was we get into these other ones, which quite a few people have heard of the D&M pyramid. But when I was researching this, I came across the Elysium pyramids as well.
Right.
And these were discovered on some of the Mariner images. Curiously, the first person to bring these up as possible pyramids was none other than Carl Sagan. He mentioned them in his Cosmos book in 1980.
Yeah. I used to have that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, you look at these, and some of them do look like pyramids. I discovered a couple of others nearby, which I don't think were the original ones, but you look on this Google Mars, and I've got them on one of the pages of my book here from page 70 there. And this actually does look like a triangular pyramid, one of them with unequal sides. And then there's another one which is not exactly a pyramid, but it's just a weird. It looks to have straight sides. I mean, what would cause this?
Is there a geological explanation for hills with straight sides like that? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, maybe some geologists will write in and correct me of my observations. Or
You've had problems getting geologists right, haven't you?
I did actually. Yes, yeah, I did. And that I mean, we haven't spoken about the dome, which is what I use as my avatar. Maybe we'll speak
and the
about
T-bar.
that. And the T-bar. But there are, in other words, just touching on this Elysian pyramids, there are other pyramids other than the DNM pyramid that people have spoken about on Mars, which I wasn't that familiar with. And I found some further images just fairly easily, actually, on Google Mars. And again, people can make of them what they will.
Okay. So the conclusion for artificiality on Mars is far stronger than the Moon, you think?
That's basically, yeah. I mean, from what I've seen, there are more images from Mars which clearly show some type of artificiality. I've got several chapters on this in the book. We probably won't get time to do them all here. But there are some other ones where we appear to have like half-buried foundations of a house. That's one particular one that I came across. A couple of people have sent me these. As well.
Right. Do you want to go to that one now then, Andrew? What page is that on?
Let's just have to find that.
The Corf one? No?
We can talk about that because that's a lesser known one. And there's another one, it's just almost on its own. It might be after the...
Is this page 86? So, a big hint of a rectangle?
Yeah. It's that one.
Yeah, so do you want to go to that one and then we'll go back and do Corf one and the T channel, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so you've entitled this A Big Hint of a Rectangle.
Yeah,
so it does look a bit like, it actually looks like St. Peter's Church.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so to me, as other people have argued, and I agree, people like Hoagland have said it and a few others, if you saw some of these in archaeological aerial images of the Earth, you'd say, yeah, that's definitely archaeology. And this image, USGS image E1046, that to me looks like the corner of a ruined building. It looks like archaeology and not geology. Again, I could be wrong. Somebody can correct me, but I think digs have been done on less than this. But of course they won't do it because they say there's no evidence of a civilization on Mars. But then it becomes a catch-22 situation, of course. And then we have the Inca City in a similar. That's what the name they gave it. That is the name they gave the Inca City. Again, we might have covered this on one of the earlier shows, but it's worth revisiting because it's a highly significant image that David Malin, and you mentioned him in your lecture, I think he gave the name the Inca City to that image from 1972, Mariner 9 image. So what's going on there? Go and look at it and see what you think.
So just go back to this, it looks like an exclamation mark.
Right.
Is that a natural feature?
Yeah, again, look at that image. You've almost got shades of the face there with this sort of the shaped sides of it pointing towards, this mound just a bit further along. And they actually, I think, put that on the Mars Global Surveyor website, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter website. They gave it the title of the exclamation mark.
So you've compared it to this mound in Japan.
Yes, this is again. I stumbled across this on another blog, somebody else's blog. You have these tombs which sort of look a bit like a key. You could say it's an exclamation mark looking at one way, or a keyhole. Looks like a keyhole. And the Kofun in Japan does look the same. Was that built? Was there some echo of Martian culture in Japanese civilization, and they somehow copied this? Centuries later. I don't know, but it's an extremely strange comparison,
Now this one you've termed the T channel. Are you saying that is sunken in? Again,
it is, yeah.
It's not raised.
It definitely is. I mean, you can see that more clearly on. You can see that more clearly on Google Mars.
It looks raised to me.
Yeah,
but
I know. I think it's just the way that it's the contrast and the illumination.
Right.
I thought it was raised as well, but it is actually a channel.
Well, you have tried to get comments from geologists on that one, haven't you?
Yes, that one and the dome, which we'll probably mention a bit more about in a bit. But basically, I took two of the images from the ones that I'd come around. This is years back. This was back in 2004. And I sent them to geologists just with the images. on their own. I didn't send any links initially.
You didn't tell them they were from Mars?
No, I didn't tell them anything. I just wanted them to say, well, okay, that's a rock of some kind, but where is it from? And that's when I sent them the links. And one guy, he ended up writing back saying, oh, I don't believe in big conspiracy theories. I wasn't asking him about conspiracy theories. I was asking him about geology, because he was a geologist. So I didn't get the answer. He just said, oh, good luck with your investigations.
No.
You know.
He's what you call a dickhead.
So why though? Why wasn't, well, we know why, but it was quite disheartening that these people were not interested in these structures. It's like there's some block.
So did any geologists actually try and explain what that could be?
No. I did actually get two responses. One was from the guy who said he didn't believe in conspiracy theories about, NASA covering up evidence of life on another planet or UFOs or whatever. And I got another guy responded, said he was curious what these images showed, but after that he didn't respond. He just admitted he was curious.
So, all right, your opinion, Andrew, it's artificial, you think?
Yes.
And any idea, have you had any thoughts on what it might have been used for? So this has been like a V trench being dug, and it's got a T onto it.
Yeah.
So what could it be? Drainage, or could it be foundations?
Who knows? Yeah, it could be some kind of drainage. Could be, some, I don't know.
Why would you do that on Earth? But why would you dig a channel like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Any ideas?
Was it? Yeah. Anybody with notices significance in this image, please tell us. I don't know what it's for. Then the next chapter. For fans of Frankie Goes to Hollywood, I call Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, which was chapter 7 in my book. I've got a whole chapter on this dome, which really, I still use that as my avatar image because I think it is probably the most fascinating image from anywhere in the solar system, to me at least. And I still haven't seen anyone try to explain it. There is no explanation for what this dome is. This is where we go back to the electric universe. The electric universe claims that suggests that it's a plasma formation. That you've got electrical discharge. It's gone into the ground. It's melted the rock, and then the rock's re-solidified in a spherical formation. And they've got this. I got a picture of this in the book. I've got the comparison, and I've had about 20 emails over the years showing me that same thing. That's why I put it in the book.
Right. And
I've got this in comparison out of their video, and I point out some of the differences between what the electric universe proposes with this plasma formation and the actual dome, which isn't the same. It's similar, but it's not the same.
So they're saying it's a naturally occurring thing. It's a huge lightning bolt, if you like, but probably far more powerful than a lightning bolt, something which is just a phenomenal blast of electrical energy, which has heated the rock up to some massive temperature, and when it's settled down, it's formed this blob inside a crater.
Correct. That's essentially what they're saying.
Right.
And
you think that the sorry to interrupt you.
That's right.
You think that the dome part could be artificial?
I think the dome is artificial. The crater may be natural, but particularly what's the intriguing feature of the dome is it's got like a tube which goes out about the 1 o'clock position. And you can see that both on the low resolution image.
Would that be the toilet pipe?
It could be. It could be the U-bend. Yes, goes to the U-bend. Who knows? But that to me is really intriguing. You look at it close up. You look at it on the distance shot, and it still to me looks like that is going somewhere else.
Right.
But what I did discover when I was looking at this more thoroughly on Google Mars is there seemed to be a whole field of these domes, and I actually discovered almost a twin of this dome in one of the other images, and that was quite interesting.
So on page 95, Andrew, can you bring up 95?
Let's get to that. 95.
Is this what you're talking about?
Let's have a look. Yes.
Right. So you've got two craters in the top right, yeah.
Yes.
Well, below it, that looks like quite a square.
It does, doesn't
almost
it?
like a building underneath.
That's right.
Or
that's
a pyramid,
right.
even.
Yeah. Again, that looks like archaeology. To me, if that was seen on Earth, that would be evidence of some type of archaeology.
So what's your conclusion in finding these other similar craters then to the dome?
Well, I mean, potentially if you look at these and you look at the structure of them, potentially. I'm not saying this is what it is, but and other people have suggested this. Certainly, this what's his name? Palmero, I think is his name. I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. He thinks that there could be some type of underground tunnel system here, and maybe this is Mars is equivalent of a dome city, that we're looking at. And these are all, fairly close together. I think within sort of a few hundred miles of each other. So is it a dome city? I haven't seen other people talk about these domes, and I discovered quite a few of them on the Google Mars images that I hadn't seen before writing this book. And I've got 7 or 8 pictures in the book just to show you what I mean. So to me, this does, again, look like archaeology and not geology. Mm-hmm. Or rather a combination of archaeology and geology, perhaps I might say.